Hey everybody, John Davis here for Wasaga Woodworks. Gorgeous day out today. I'm really excited to do this. I'm going to start, this is going to be the first of 4 videos in a construction series talking about how I build my picture frames. So you as the consumer, if you want to buy one, can watch and try to replicate, which I think is great, especially if you're a do-it-yourselfer trying to extend your own knowledge, or if you just want to know more about the frames you're buying and how they're constructed, you watch this 4-part series and you'll know. So the way that I do my videos is if you minimize the actual video so that it's not full screen and scroll down to the comments, you'll see blue time tags. Those time tags are on there so that you can skip a part to whatever part of the video that you want to see. If you're more of a seasoned woodworker or carpenter and you don't want to listen to all my yippity-yappity for about 4 or 5 minutes before each video that I go into, you can skip right ahead and see the actual construction part of the video. For those of you that are do-it-yourselfers or more beginners, or you don't have the type of tools that I have, I will spend time at the beginning of each video talking about a lot of the mistakes that you're going to encounter, a lot of the mistakes that I encountered, as well as why I use the tools I use, and some other tools that you can use if you don't have the tools that you see me using. So the 4 parts of this series, this first one is obviously going to be the introduction, which you're watching now, and then we'll go into the shop here in a second. We'll talk measurements, kind of how you gauge what you want your picture to look like, or what you want your frame to look like, rather, based on the type of backing glass and the actual picture that you're going to use, and whether you're going to make it a permanent frame or it's something that you can switch pictures out occasionally in. Then I'm going to talk about the cutting. That's going to be my second video, talking about cuts, specifically miter cuts, as well as the dado inset. I like the dado it. You can use a bunch of different things for that, and we'll talk more about that in that second video. The third video is going to be joining, whole video on just how to join those 4 pieces of wood together to make a completed frame. There are a million techniques in that. There are a lot. The way that I do it, I think, is really simple, a little bit equipment intensive, but I think you're going to like it. And finally, I'm going to talk finishing, which is the finer points of burning and staining, how I like to do it. And again, I'll talk multiple different equipment, products, brushes, stains, conditioners, stuff that you can use based on the type of stain or paint style that you want. All right, so let's build us some picture frames. You guys ready? Capone. Zip, zip. Come on. Come on, Zip. Want to go build some picture frames? Yeah. Yeah. Build some picture frames. Come on. You stay outside, Zip? Stay outside. Always got your little helpers. All right, so let's talk measurements. Super important, something that's easily overlooked, something that everybody knows how to pull a tape out and measure real quick. But planning our frame is based upon 2 very important decisions. One, do I want this type of frame to be something that I'm putting a piece of artwork or a picture in that is going to be permanently placed in there and I'm going to seal the back? Or do I want this to be the type of a frame that I can interchange pictures on? This particular video is going to talk about the latter. Now, later on, I'm going to have to do another video talking about how to seal it permanently, but this one is just going to be talking about how to secure it temporarily so that we can interchange pictures over time. All right, because that's primarily what I build. I build an entire frame here and ship it out so that you can take it apart, put your picture in it, and then hang it. So what we need to do is we need to, first of all, select the type of wood. I like to use pine, and this whole process is going to be done using 1x4 common board pine. I like it because it's easy to work with. It's not very hard. We don't need something super hard and durable like oak or something that would cost quite a bit of money. So something that is relatively cheap will give us a great lasting finish. I also like the detail of pine as well as how easy it is to manipulate. So this piece of 1x4 pine, The true dimensions are going to be 3/4 of an inch thick by 3.5 inches in width. Whenever I make my cuts and whenever I make my measurements based on the type of picture I have, whenever I make my linear cuts, which are going to be our miter cuts, I always measure from the inside and I cut off of those. It's just how I do it. A lot of people like to cut from the outside. A lot of people like to keep this squared, cut one solid piece and then cut the miters. Me, I like to cut my miters directly off of the measurement that I make. Front side of the picture, as the viewer is going to see, picture behind, and then the back side. Most important part of the back side is going to be our inset. The inset is the section that holds and overlaps the picture. So from the front side, it'll look like this. From the back side, it will look like this. It's the section that holds the picture in. So how deep our inset is going to be, as well as how wide our inset is going to be, factors on everything that's in the back of our picture. Now, for this particular picture, I am going to construct this using what I have right here. There are two basic elements to that. It's the glass and the backing. The glass, which, as you can see right here, I just put my decal on it, making a nice little picture. It's 1/8 of an inch thick. So that's our first measurement, is 1/8 of an inch. Then we have our picture, which is basically paper thin. I mean, consider this green backing here that I thought had a nice contrast to my white. So my white decal there. So we'll consider that the picture. We won't even factor that into the measurement. And then we have our backing, which is 1/4 of an inch thick, right? So we have 1/4 of an inch that we're factoring in with our backing. That's a foam board that's compressible. I like it to be compressible because of the way that I like to finish off my frames. I like to finish them off with 1/8 of an inch offset, screwed in to my board. So I'll take this 1/8 of an inch offset here, and I'll put a screw into that first opening there, and it will compress, as you can see the overlap right here, down on that board. Okay? So we have 1/8 of an inch offset, added to 1/4 of an inch board backing with 1/8 of an inch piece of glass, which, when all placed together, will equal 1/2 of an inch. Just like that, which is exactly how I like to do my frame. So I know that the depth of this needs to be 1/2 of an inch. So how far on the width? Now I used to do this at 1/2 of an inch less whenever I made my angled cuts. And I'll explain that here in a second. It'll make more sense when actually we go into the cuts and you see the completed frame. But for planning, you need to understand this. This particular picture size is 11 by 14. So what I am going to do is I am going to take 5/8 off of 11 by 14. So the distance that I am going to cut my 45-degree angles on the inside is going to be 10 3/8, right? That would be the 11-inch portion, which would be the side. And the 14-inch portion, I'm going to cut at 13 3/8, right? And the reasoning for that is because I have a 1/4 of an inch deep inset. That's how thick it is. 1/4 of an inch is great because it's enough to bite and hold on to the picture itself, but it's not so much that it covers the beauty of what it is you want to display and what you need a frame encasing it for anyway. And again, these will make a lot more sense as we go into it, and I'll talk a little bit more detail as we get into the process. But now I want to talk about everything we're actually going to need in order to make this frame. So let's take a look at that. Alright, so I like using a miter saw to make all of my cuts, especially my miter cuts. That's what's called a miter saw. These are relatively inexpensive. I mean, you can get crazy with them. You can spend upwards of like over $1,000 on a whole miter setup. This is a pretty inexpensive one, pretty do-it-yourselfery, and I've had it for years and I love it. And just like a regular chop saw, the only difference is that it slides and it also goes to up to 45 degrees on either side to make your adjustments relatively easy. Another type of saw that you can use is a table saw. I'll show you what that looks like over here. So we have a 2 saw setup here. One table saw here and my other primary table saw here. Obviously, if you do a lot of woodworking, you're probably going to have one of these already. What I did is I bought 2 table saws because I like to do my inset, which again is the inset right here. I like to do that using a table saw, but I like to do it with a Dado blade. This is just specifically designed for making my long angle cuts. A lot of people will use these for their miters. If you're a table saw guy, you know this already. Table saw guys will have jigs for everything. Literally. Like for their crosscut jigs, for everything. Check it out. It goes really in depth. If you're going to mass produce a lot, and I mean a lot of wood and specific projects, it's really hard to beat a table saw with a good jig, right? But this is just a table saw setup. I like to use the miter saw like I said before, and I'll show you my Dado real quick. Alright guys, so Dado setup is again just a table saw. A cheaper version, the one I just showed you there, has all the same capabilities, just a little bit smaller. I use this table saw only for dados. So I do enough dadoing to justify this. If you don't, again, if you only have a table saw or if you only have a miter saw and you're a router guy, you don't need a dado saw. You can use a router to make all of your insets. I know a lot of guys that love to do this using specifically only a router, which is fine. It is what it is. It's what you want to use. For me, again, I like to miter my corners, and then I like to dado using my Dado saw specifically for this. If I'm going to trim my frame down from 3.5 to only a 2-inch frame or even a 1-inch frame, then I'll rip it real quick on my other table saw, and it just makes better use of my time. So now that we've covered all that, let's cover everything else we're going to need over here on the table. All right, so once we have cut our miters and we've cut our inset using our Dado router, whatever it is we're going to do, we're going to have 4 pieces like this that we need to join into a box to make our frame. All right, I like obviously to use wood glue. If you've done any woodwork at all, wood glue is an absolute must. This Tybon 3 is super, it's like concrete. I love it. All the pictures in my house are done, the ones that I made for all my posters and things like that, I did with just Tybon. I didn't screw them together or anything, and they held great. All right. However, I can't wait 24 hours for them to dry, so it's much more beneficial to me instead of using a band clamp, getting all 4 of them together, putting the wood glue on, letting it set for 24 hours. I want to be able to screw it in so that I can take the band clamp off and be done. Obviously, you're going to need a band clamp, some type of a clamping system to hold all 4 corners of these together. This band clamp in particular, it's about $20 at your local hardware store, and I've used it for about 2 years and probably made over 400 different frames with just that one. I think it works great. There are other clamps out there that you can use. I just like the versatility and simplicity of that one. When I go to join my 4 corners of my frames, I really like a pocket hole jig, right? If you have one of these, you love them. Once you start using them, you'll never go back. It's a bit pricey to get started on, but once you do it, you'll never regret it. So I have my pocket hole jig, and then I have my pocket hole drill, obviously with my drill bit, and the long square tip in my impact, okay? And if you're do-it-yourselfer, chances are you probably have a drill and an impact already. So you can use the drill bit and the securing square for the pocket hole screws, which are very similar to cabinet screws. You can use them both in either the impact or the drill, but if you're going to be doing this quite a bit, I suggest that you have a drill and an impact. Just makes life easier, right? You're going to use 1 1/4 if you're following my guidelines. This is 3/4 of an inch thick, and you're going to join it from 3/4 inch thick to 3/4 inch thick. On all these pocket hole screws, especially this particular brand, if you look at the back, it'll give you the guide. That's going to be 1 1/4 inch screws, okay? And we're going to use 2 of them per joint, right, for a total of 8. Once that's done, we're going to take these little pocket hole plugs and we're going to plug the little pocket hole, right? These plugs are made for 2 1/2 inch screws and holes that accommodate 2 1/2 inch. Once again, it's 1 1/4. So we're going to need to take about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch off of these. In order to do that, you can either use needle nose pliers, hold it, run it over a table saw, or use the miter saw to do that. And if you don't quite feel comfortable, you use a block and some type of flim saw. This particular flim saw I really love. It tends to bind and twerk a little bit, so it's kind of a unique skill. You can also use a band saw or any type of a hand saw, and you can cut that off too, right? Of course, all this is the material that you are going to need to join your frame together the way I do it, right? Now let's talk products that you're going to need to complete the process and finish. Over here on the other side of the table. Alright guys, so not really a lot of finishing products. One thing I do want to talk about a little bit is if you're burning. Excuse me. So there are 2 different types of household type burn products that you can get to burn wood. One comes in a blue container just like this, it's propane. Another one comes in a yellow container that is called mapping fuel. Now the big difference between the 2 is that one burns a lot hotter than the other. The yellow mapping fuel tends to burn a lot hotter, and that's mainly if you have a big project. Like I know buddies that burn walls or burn flooring, and it's really great, burns really hot if you want one straight pass and get what you get. For picture frames and things that are a little bit more delicate, I find I can get a whole lot more precise using propane because it's less heat. So I can go with a heavy char on the outside, a little bit lighter in the middle, heavy on the other side, whatever I want. It just gives me more variation and flexibility. So I like using the propane. But you're going to need a burn kit like this. Again, probably about anywhere from $30 to $40 depending upon where you buy it at your local hardware store. Pick one of those up. We're going to need obviously some stirrers for our stain. I really like to use these cheap foam brushes. Little throwaways. They'll last for multiple projects. If I'm doing 10 or 15 frames in a day, chances are they're generally the same stain, especially if it's getting burned. I really like this natural type stain, something light like that. And I really like these foam brushes for that. Gloves, you don't need gloves, but it makes life a whole lot easier. Last thing you're going to need is some type of a sealant. You're going to take all the time and effort to do all this and make this project. You're going to want to protect it. So I like using a triple coat polyurethane. You can use matte, semi-gloss, gloss. I really like the gloss. So that covers everything and all the equipment as well as how I do my measurements. I hope that you enjoyed it. Look on video number 2 and we'll actually get started building a frame. That'll be going into cuts. Thanks again. Leave me a comments in the section below. Hope you guys enjoyed it and stay tuned for my next video. God bless and hope you have a great day. Hold tight. Go home. Yeah, you do. Go home. Go home.